Hello heroes and villains of all shapes and sizes, my name is Jordan and welcome to my channel. Today's video is coming a bit later than I wanted it to, just because my last video was having some audio issues, so hopefully this one will be better quality, fingers crossed. If it is, today's video is going to be essentially an August wrap-up, except I'm going to be doing a different version of it. I'm going to be doing a draw/paint with me. And while I'm drawing, I'm going to be voicing over, talking about all the books I read this month, and there were a lot, so I'll be leaving timestamps down below if you would like to skip to a particular book. You can do that. And while I'm talking, I'm going to be illustrating a picture inspired by two of the readathons I participated in last month, that being the Scalawagathon, which is pirate themed, and Summerween, which is Halloween themed. I really loved both of them, and in honor of that I created two characters, Marco, who's a pirate, and Marabella, who is a witch. And essentially my storyline is just that they are kind of friends, kind of enemies, and they just really like pranking each other. I actually took this video twice, so I did this already. I did an illustration for them before this, and I'm gonna insert a clip of that right now. So that was the first time I drew them. Now you're going to be seeing take two, another version of that, except this time it's going to be in reverse. Marco is going to be pranking Marabella. It's just some fun to be had. And I do want to say that I am not a professional artist by any means, can definitely be improved, and this is just something fun I wanted to try on my channel. That being said, if you have any critiques, some constructive criticism, I am an open ear, and I would love to hear how to make this better, or if you want to see something else and a regular sit down, just let me know. So without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, let's start off with some statistics, shall we? This month I read 27 books with a total of 9,589 pages. That's 13 fantasy, 8 thrillers, 2 contemporary, 1 poetry, and 1 science fiction book, as well as 2 manga. A personal record for myself, I've never really read that much. But starting off with fantasy, I read Beyond the Deepwoods and Stormchaser, books 1 and 2 in the Edge Chronicles by Paul Stewart and Chris Riddell. I picked this up because Chris Riddell is one of my favorite illustrators. He has such a detailed style that is perfect for fantasy novels. This series is about a boy named Twig who grows up feeling like he doesn't belong in his community, and when he finds out that he is actually adopted, he is pushed to go on an adventure to find out where he does belong. This book is filled with imaginative creatures, there are sky pirates, and fair warning, for a children's book, there is quite a bit of violence in it. Overall, I thought the illustrations were great, but I didn't think it was one of those middle grade books that translated to all ages, and that's okay, but personally, I won't be continuing on with the series. I think, though, that this would be perfect for a smaller human just getting into fantasy. The next book I read was for the Touch of Whimsy readathon, and it was Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Bevitt, a classic middle grade that begs the question, should everyone have eternal life? I thought the book was good until the ending. It was quite abrupt, but now that I'm thinking about it, that's just like life, huh? I also ended up watching the movie adaptation on Disney Plus. It was oddly sexual for a children's adaptation, and I was really weirded out the entire time I was watching it, but I can see why some people find the appeal. The next book I picked up was Darkdawn by J. Kristoff. I can't even remember his name, J. Kristoff. I did not like this book. It sucked. It was the third book in the Nevernight Chronicles, which follows a girl named Mia who is out for revenge against the people who killed her parents. This book is inspired by Italian history, and it involves assassins, gladiators, and pirates, all key elements I look for in books. I usually love those things, and this is such a popular series. I did enjoy the first book. It was fun, but unfortunately I didn't care for the second until the end, and then I absolutely hated the last book. I can't believe I put up with the series for this long. I just wanted to see what Piera Ford, one of my favorite booktubers, saw in this book, and I know I need glasses, but guys, I couldn't find it. I think I might make a book talk about why I didn't like it, but it wasn't for lack of trying, I can tell you that. The next book I read was by Patrick Ness, and it was Burn. This book follows a biracial girl growing up in America during the 1800s. Her father's farm is not doing well, and so they hire a dragon to help them out. It is a very absurd fantasy story, and it is so weird, but I loved it. Patrick Ness really likes to play with the idea of what makes a hero, and I really liked the conclusion he came to in this book. The next book is Lord of the White Hell, Book 1 by Jin Hale. This book follows Karam Kurzaki, who may be considered a mechanical prodigy among his own people, but when he becomes the first Haldim ever admitted to the prestigious Sagrada Academy, he is looked down upon. He does find an ally in his classmate, but finds out that the boy is actually cursed with the white hell that everyone seems to be terrified of. This book is fantasy, but it's more of a romance and an adult one at that. It's like one of those fan fictions that turn out to be better than the original because anything goes. I really enjoyed myself, but I do feel the need to point out something that a lot of people hated about this book, that depending on how you view these things, there is cheating. I'm putting in that in air quotes, but you can't see, because the couple was never made official. Also, I don't believe it was random. I actually think it was intentionally used to point out and fix a huge flaw in the relationship that wouldn't have been addressed otherwise. The next book I picked up was Beware the Night by Jessica Fleck. This book is about a society split between the rich people and the poor. They all worship the sun, but only the poor are made into sacrifices to keep the night at bay. Our main character's grandfather is made into one of these sacrifices, and the book takes off from there. I honestly can't remember much about this book other than the fact that I was very bored. I think at some point it turned into a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but again, I don't really remember. The writing is what kept me going since it's very flowery and whimsical, especially when it comes to the folklore about the planets. However, I don't think the writing is enough to make me recommend this book, and even though it is a duology, I won't be continuing. The next book was a nice reprieve from life's troubles, and that was Kiki's Delivery Service, the new translation by Echo Kadono, a coming of age story about a witch. Now, I love the movie. Oh, I really hope you don't hear my dog in the background, but I'm going to continue. Anyway, as I was saying, I really love the movie by Studio Ghibli, but I need to stress that the characters in the book are more juvenile versions than the movie. They constantly worry about appearances, they are rude to people, and some of them even steal. So it was quite strange to read, but in the end, this book had a charm all its own that I ended up falling for. Kiki goes on a lot more delivery service adventures, and it's really fun. I then read Snow and Rose by Emily Winfield Martin, a fairy tale retelling that was indeed beautiful but a little slow for my tastes. It follows two sisters, one practical and one idealist, that grow up pampered in a mansion until one day their father disappears into the woods. Because they no longer have an income, they have to move into the woods themselves, and soon they start to unravel its enchanting secrets. I've never actually read the original fairy tale, so I can't tell you how it compares, but I can say my favorite part was the library in this book because, unlike other libraries, it does not rent out books, it rents out other things. I won't spoil what those are, but I'll just say that I probably would have just read this book to find out about that concept, as well as see Martin's beautiful illustrations, which are just fantastic watercolors. The next books that I read were all during the Scalawagathon, so I do have a vlog up with more detailed thoughts if you want to check that out. The first book I read was The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson, the second book in the Mistborn series that is so beloved by everyone, that is, except for me. That's not to say I didn't enjoy it, but I also didn't love it. I just find that each book has a conclusion all its own. So I'm never really invested enough to keep reading. I never want to know what mysteries lie in the next book. I will say that Brandon Sanderson, while he's known primarily for his world building, I think he is best at his character building, and that especially shows in Well of Ascension because a lot of it is spent inside the characters' minds. And unfortunately for me, a lot of time is spent on the romance portion of the book, and it takes till like the last 200 pages of this like 756 page book for any action to happen. Although I will say that the ending was absolutely brilliant and perhaps worth it. I don't know. The next book I picked up was The Princess Will Save You by Sarah Henning, a book I had such high hopes for but ultimately let me down. It is about a spoiled princess whose father dies one day and she is not able to become queen because succession is passed through the male heirs, and because she has no brothers, the council is trying to force her to marry a man, a prince somewhere in foreign land, but she actually already has a boyfriend and he is a stable hand. And so, in order to get her to do what they want, people end up stealing her boyfriend away, and she throws away everything and runs after him to save him. And I wanted to love this book, but the book was all about the princess. Even the characters were doing things out of character in order to help her, and it just seemed very self centered. Yeah. And also, the love interest had zero personality. He kept saying, "Yes, princess," just all the time. Oh, actually, it was always princess, which somehow is even worse. He had absolutely no spice to his personality, but maybe I'm being too tough on this book, so I'm gonna stop talking about it because honestly, it just makes me a little mad. The next book I read, and the last book I read for the Scalawagathon, was The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. My goodness, the more I think back on this book, the more I like it. At the time, though, I was having second thoughts just because this book is told in multiple points of view. And the first point of view I didn't like, which meant I only liked half of the book. But the ending was brilliant. Let me tell you what it's about before I keep talking about it. It is about a girl who accidentally awakens Asian warrior. It is an adult fantasy series based in Egypt, I guess Cairo, but also inside the Jinn world. And I'm reading the second book now, and I can tell you guys it gets so much better. It is a bit of a slow start, so if you're worried about that, maybe try picking up the audiobook to help yourself out. Now, outside of the Scalawagathon, the last fantasy book I read was My Calamity Jane by Jodi Meadows and Brody Ashton and Cynthia Hand. This is the third book in the My Jane series. It is a retelling about Calamity Jane, who was in the Wild West show in early American history, and it involves werewolves and a whole lot of romance. I didn't enjoy this book. This is a book that I can't fault too hard though because it does not take itself seriously. I think that these authors just wanted to have a little bit of fun. So I'm not going to say much more on that just because I want to let them have their fun. There we go. Moving on to the next genre I read this month, I'm lumping three all together. That is suspense, horror, and thrillers. This is a genre or set of genres I don't read often, if at all. I picked these books up primarily because of Summerween, which was a Halloween-based readathon that happened, and I was really excited to participate in it, and I was going to post a vlog, but unfortunately, due to my audio issues, I ended up having to scrap it, but I'm going to talk about the books here. So, starting off with books I read outside of that readathon, I read some of Lisa Jewell's work, The Family Upstairs and Then She Was Gone. Both of these books I'm not even going to explain the plot for because the titles say it all, and it's suspense, so I don't want to give you too much information anyway, but I can say that I didn't really like these. I thought that Lisa Jewell did great character work in getting inside these characters' minds, but I think that was all she was interested in. So all the surprises or any surprises that were supposed to happen never really felt surprising because all of the focus was just on the characters and how they were reacting to these terrible situations. Moving on, we have The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This is a book that I really, really did like. It is about a journalist who ends up going on a cruise in order to do some publicity for them, but really weird things start happening to her and around her on the cruise. It gets really creepy. She starts questioning herself about what's happening. It made me never want to go on a cruise. This is a suspense that really packs the action in from page one. Also, Ruth Ware, as an author of thrillers, I just find all of her work to be very satisfying. Maybe not the best or like A plus, but definitely a solid A for me. Now, all of the next books I read were for the Summer Ween Readathon, starting off with The Night Swim by Megan Golding. I really wanted to like this book. It was pitched to me as something that had a lot of stalker vibes, as something that had a protagonist with a podcast that would sound really great as an audiobook, and all of those things just got me really excited for this. I didn't need to know much more than that. And when I started it off, I realized this isn't really a suspense or thriller. This is more like a court case novel because most of the time is spent in the court. And for me personally, the topic was just really uncomfortable to read. It was about a sexual assault case and a podcaster who goes to cover it. And the podcaster is constantly being contacted by a really suspicious fan who really wants her to investigate the death of her sister. It's a lot going on in one book, but in the end, it wasn't really a thriller to me. It was just a book showcasing the cold hard truths of a sexual assault case and who can get away with what. The next book I picked up was The Whisper Man by Alex North, and this book I liked even less than The Night Swim. And it's by no means a fault of the book, it's just that I don't like thrillers about kids, and now I know that. It is essentially one of those crime episodes where a child goes missing and the police have a limited amount of time to find them before something bad happens. I thought all the characters in this were very unlikable. The father-son relationship was terrible in every scenario, and I also really didn't like the trope that was played here where the child had an imaginary friend and would say really weird things just to make the book sound creepier. I didn't really like that. The next book I read was Final Girls by Riley Sager. I had a good time reading this. It was about a girl named Quincy who survives a horrible massacre, and she's the only one that does so. So the media group her together with two other girls that also survive horrible situations. And one day, Quincy is approached by another final girl who tells her that the other final girl has been murdered. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but essentially one of them has been murdered, and the other two have to figure out if someone is murdering them and what's going on. I had a good time. I kept questioning myself on who was the bad guy and what was going on, so I definitely thought it was worth the read. The next book I picked up was honestly a new favorite, and I was so excited about it. It was Confessions by Kanye Minato. My goodness, this was such a good book. So, the book starts off with a teacher addressing her classroom and talking about why the school is having the children drink milk. And it's this whole monologue that happens. And by page 20, the teacher begins to discuss the death of her daughter that happened on the school grounds and the two students that she believes did it. And it is just this whole tale of this teacher's revenge. The final book I picked up for the Summerween Readathon was An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. This is about a girl who takes part in a test study as a subject, and she just has to answer a list of questions for, I believe, 5 minutes each day for a certain amount of time, just to kind of see what type of person she was, and somehow this was going to be applied into a test. And as she's taking the test, she realizes that the answers hit a little bit too close to home, and something might be off about that, and she's trying to figure out who exactly is the person behind this test. I thought that this would be really similar to A Silent Patient, just because of the synopsis and the fact that both books deal with a psychiatrist. I'm not sure why I drew the connection, but I was in a way right to draw the connection because there definitely were similar ideas happening. However, An Anonymous Girl just was a little slow, and the stakes were not high at all. Nothing bad was ever going to happen to the person, at least you never thought so, or I never thought so. So I, in the end, didn't really like this book, unfortunately. The next genre I read was contemporary, and I read 2 for this genre, which is surprising because I really don't read a lot of contemporary actually. But I read Hello Universe by Erin Entrada Kelly. This author is definitely my favorite standalone middle grade author. She's so wonderful. Hello Universe is about a child psychic, a shy boy, a deaf girl, and a bully, and about what happens when they all collide. I particularly liked the elements of Filipino folklore that play into this. The shy boy's grandmother is from the Philippines, and she's often recounting her tales there, and it really makes the entire book sound so whimsical, and I really enjoyed it, especially the life lessons. This is definitely a book that translates to a lot of ages, and just read this to your kids if you have some. It's really good. The next book I picked up was The Wicker King by Kay Ancrum. Now, this book I really, really wanted to love. It sounded very interesting. It's about 2 best friends, one of which begins to see a fantastical world that no one else can see, and the entire concept is based on whether it's actually a mental health issue or if this is actually a fantasy world that no one else can see. I read this, and I should have known just based on the plot that this would be in a lot of gray area, but I was really excited, and honestly, this book was really enjoyable to read. However, it romanticizes very problematic relationships, and I can't recommend this book and feel comfortable about it. I have a review still up about why I really didn't like the book, but in the end, I'm not even going to talk about it anymore just because this book does really upset me. Moving on to a lighter topic, we're going to talk about the one poetry book I read this month, and that is The Melancholy Death of Oyster Boy and Other Stories by Tim Burton. This should really just be a book of rhymes. It's not really a poetry book, it's just a couple rhymes on a page and some illustrations that tell a story, and it is definitely in Tim Burton's style. It is a bunch of sympathetic characters who, by no fault of their own, are very unliked by society. For example, you have a superhero who can only produce stains, and for that he is hated. And it's kind of sad. It's definitely not for kids, if you're wondering. The next genre I read was sci-fi, and for that I read Sleeping Giants by Sullivan Novell. This is a book that Naya Reads and Smiles used to rave about, and I'm really glad that I finally got to this. It is about a young girl who falls into this giant hand when she's little, and these giant artifacts pop up all over the world, and as she grows older, she ends up becoming the scientist that tries to discover what these body parts spread across the world are and what to do with them. And I really loved this book. I read it during the Scalawagathon, and it was probably my favorite book of that week. And I definitely recommend it for people who really like superhero movies or like very action-packed plots. There's not a lot of character development, I'll say, until the last book in the trilogy, which, by the way, I've actually finished it now. And I did think that the first book was really good. The second book was even better, and the third book was probably my least favorite, which you never really want with a conclusion, but I can see it possibly being other people's favorites. So if it sounds interesting to you, do read. It is told in interview styles and like diary formats, so it is very cool that way. Moving on to the next genre, well, it's not really a genre, more like a category, but that is manga. And the first manga that I read this month was Uzamaki by Junjo Ito. And my goodness, okay, so this is a horror manga. And Junji Ito is well known for his horrible, not horrible looking, but just like the images he draws can evoke horrible feelings inside of you. And even though I'm a wimp and I don't really like horror, I liked this a lot more than I thought I would. It is essentially about a coastal town in Japan that is being cursed by a mesmerizing spiral. It starts off with a lot of characters being fascinated by the spiral and then small things going wrong. And by the end of it, it goes from 0 to 180 real fast with this whole apocalypse happening. And I don't know what other people think, but the book really reminded me of Nancy Drew for some reason. So if you've read this and you think that too, let me know because I don't want to be alone in this. The next book I read was The Promised Neverland by Kayu Shirai. I actually already watched the first 3 episodes in the anime before reading this, and I already knew I would enjoy it, and I was right. The book, I think, does give a little bit more information about what's happening, but the plot follows an orphanage and the dark happenings that are going on that no one else in the orphanage knows about until three of our orphan protagonists find out about it. I'm being really vague here just because I think if you don't know the the bad thing that's going on, then you'll be really, really shocked. And I think that could add a lot of flavor to the series for you. But even if you already know what's going on, I think you'll still really like it. I'm definitely going to be continuing on with the series, which is fun. I found a new series to read. That's exciting. Also, the anime is on Netflix now, so if you want to watch it there, you can do that. So those are all the books I read this month. I thought it was a really great reading month. If you want to talk to me in the comments down below about what you read, I'd love to do that. Also, if you read any of these and have any thoughts that you want to share, I'd love to hear about it. Like and subscribe, as they say, and I'll see you in my next video very soon.